Hi, Lisa. Welcome.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
My gallery view.
Would you like to start giving us an introduction of who you are and what you do?
Are we on live?
Yeah.
Oh. So what was your question again? I'm sorry.
You want to just give a little introduction on who you are and what you do and your work?
Oh, my name is Lisa Frechette, and I am trained in counseling. I have master's degrees in counseling and in education, and I have worked as a teacher in public schools and mostly private schools. And so when I moved here to Sarasota about 10 years ago, I started my own tutoring business. And part of the reason I want to do that is so that I could devote the other part of my passion, which is art, bringing my art into the world. And during that time, um, let's see, during that time, my son was struggling with addiction.
Okay.
He moved here from Massachusetts to Southwest Florida, and he was in recovery. And he was clean and sober for a year, and then he started drinking again, and he actually died driving drunk. Fortunately, no one was hurt, and so on. So that was almost 7 years ago, and he had a powerful presence, and I also had a spiritual base from really birth on. And and so the connection that we had was really strong and deep. And he has been giving me little snippets of like downloads of what he wants me to do. So right, which works right in with that, the part of me that's an educator, the part of me that wants to be of service in the world, and the part of me that's an artist, and a part of me that loves to write. So I wrote a book that was self-published just over a year ago. And um, it's called Transforming to Joy, and the subtitle is Responding to My Son's Struggle with Addiction. And he channeled his parts, and it's his messages to me have been write the book, talk about the book, and bring the book into the world. So the book kind of all the different parts that I've just outlined, like the educated part of me and the counseling part, as well as the artist part, kind of is finding a path with this Transforming to Joy book and the services that are developing under that umbrella.
It's such a beautiful story, and you answer a couple of my questions in your story, which is perfect because most people, I'm trying to find out, at what point did you know that what you're doing is your purpose, your dharma? When are you having that sort of awareness? But I think it's obvious just by the way that you're channeling through him that this is really what you're meant to do.
Right, and I think that I've been reflecting on this process, like what is my dharma, and anticipating this conversation with you, and it's interesting to watch because I choose to live intuitively and follow that intuitive, and it just works for me, and it's interesting how things and the serendipity and the things how life unfolds, being tuned in to that. Like I never could have dreamed up that I would write a book about it the way that happened, and the writing of the book, and it it wasn't none of it was a plan.
Yeah. No, I
It's,
think that's the best one.
it's all been quite an evolution. I had an art gallery downtown up until not even a year ago, until last summer, and I had my art, and I started translating my art to clothing, and I wrote the book, so the book was in the gallery too, and the landlord didn't renew the lease, and at first I was pretty stunned. It's like, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to do? And so here I am back living I'm not living downtown anymore. I'm living in a condo that I have in South Sarasota, and it's just giving me this time to really explore more deeply and to open more to what that dharma is at this moment in time, and to live kind of in that present moment.
Yeah. what are some of the things that you're working on? And I mean, it doesn't have to be specific to this current era that we're in, but just what are some of the new beginnings that you're creating as far as new projects and new work and new offerings?
Um, well, one thing that I'm writing on, the other word that comes to my mind when I know I'm meant to do something is the word compelling. I just have like this compelling thing to do something. One is work around grief, and I'll backtrack on that. I also had I had 3 children, and my daughter is 30, and Adam was a couple years younger.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who passed 7 years ago. And 6 years after they were born, so they were 7 and 5, I had a third child, and his name was Thomas. And he was born in this month of April. And he was born on his due date. That was my third child. It was the best pregnancy. But when he was born, his diaphragm worked the opposite way ours did. And the doctors didn't know what the heck to do with him. And he went to the neonatal ICU, and I lived in the neonatal ICU with him. And that time was very much like this time of, there were just so many similarities about that time of like the shock and the trauma of having a baby born sick and being really, talk about isolated. I was living in a NICU, no cell phones,
Yeah.
nothing. Like I wasn't considered a patient. I certainly didn't have visitors. So there was none of that, there was none of that. So it was really like this forced isolation, holding this little baby who really struggled to breathe. And again, his thing was a respiratory, his diaphragm worked the opposite way. So his whole medical issue was the diaphragm working. So it was like he was running his whole life. It was just like he really struggled to breathe. So that experience was really a portal for me, and it really was the beginning of a lot of change for me, and kind of like an opening to love, although I didn't really understand it for a really long time, but it was like an opening to love. And that's how I feel like this time is currently. And so I don't have total clarity on it, but I'm working on writing about this experience, like the similarities of entering into something that's where you can invite the quiet if you choose. And so we have this invitation to go in and be quiet and to look and to listen. And it really hurts at the same time. It might hurt some of the things that we're seeing in ourselves or in other people. It's not an easy time necessarily. That being said, there also can be real moments of clarity and beauty and appreciation at the same time. So they're just so similar, and I haven't put it together, but it's just interesting the timing of this being my baby Thomas's birth month and being in. So that's like one thing. But the grief thing, I had a friend back then when Thomas was born, and she said to me, she's like, you're like the queen of grief. A couple other things that happened as well, and I hated that she said that. I really it was not like anything that I enjoyed hearing her say. Because I did not want to be that. Like I didn't want that at all. But now I have to like giggle and laugh about it, because it kind of is. It's like, I won't say that the grief process is enjoyable, but the grief process is a portal for me to opening to the expansion. It's like a purifying and an opening of the heart for greater compassion. And so that's what I'm kind of working on currently is more writing, especially around this. And also, I'm not quite sure how to do it, but I'm just thinking of all the parents who do have children with addiction, and them being inside their homes and what that might be like the personal struggle. So I'm wondering about ways that maybe are reaching out to those parents, but I don't have, it hasn't all come in for me at the moment.
Yeah, that's a topic that I've discussed with a few people who have had similar paths to you and I, as far as household addiction. And I think this is a really stressful time, no matter whether you live alone or it's your child or your spouse or a close friend. This is a really trying time for people who are suffering from addiction.
Right.
And it's hard to know what resources to give them, because we're limited on connection, right? And it's virtual, and that's it. And that's still a huge, amazing gift in so many ways, but you have to have active participants too. So
Right, right. And willingness
yeah,
to,
exactly.
to look, because when you do love someone with addiction, like for me, one of the hardest parts was seeing my part in it, and what's my part, and how am I contributing to it? Not, I know I didn't cause it, and I know I can't cure it, and I can't fix it, but how am I contributing to it? And that's not fun to look at as a parent or
Sure.
anyone. It's not easy to look. So you do have to have that willingness, and that's where it's, looking, coming back to the grief again, like looking at what your fears are, what your worries might be, and so on. So yeah.
And you're in the process of coming up with some classes. I know we've talked about them and they're in the works, but as far as grief outreach too, right? For people who are experiencing grief, and whether it's a community space or a class or a virtual setting.
Grief, I know grief is grief. What grief is change. It's like something was this way and now it's not that way anymore, whether it's physical death or moving or being in, or your own physical health, or a shift in a relationship. You prefer it to be this way and now it's not that way. Or so, I mean, grief is so, the reason I love it is because for me, with my sons especially, they have both taught me how to live. And so our time here is limited, and how we choose to live it is so important. So if we really are fearless in looking at our grief, what we've lost, what we want, why we wanted it, why we're sad that we lost it. A lot of times guilt also comes up, and that it's, when you do go deep, it really is like a freeing and an opening to the beauty of life, and that's why I don't mind being called the Queen of Grief by my friend anymore.
Well, you've turned it into such a beautiful offering to so many. So that's also really, really wonderful to see, whether it's your art or your book or your classes, and so many different opportunities for people to be healed the same way that you're being healed through this.
Yes, and it's continual. It never ends. And that was the interesting thing when I was, kind of the title of the book was downloaded, and that's the key thing. The ing at the end, transform ing. It's not transformed with an ed, which assumes that you're finished. It's always ongoing. It's not like you're ever done. We're not really done until we take that last breath. And I
Yeah.
think that's also key to knowing that we're always a work in process. Yeah.
So when it comes to the work that you do and the way in which you share it, what's the ultimate dream? So the main question is, if you knew you'd be supported, what would you do?
Say that again. If what?
If you knew you'd be supported in whatever it is that you're dreaming up, what would you do?
Exactly what I'm doing now, and what I've been doing the last 7 years, which is, and that's the hard part, is looking at that fear. And when I hear that question, I think money is in the background. Like, how do you do what you love and make money at it to support yourself? And that's, a challenging question. And it just, for me, I don't know, it just somehow works out. It's like looking at, so I didn't go through at the beginning of this being indoors. I did look, and my whole income was meant to be made in March and April, and it wasn't. And because of my life experiences, it kind of passed quick. But I did have a few days of like severe panic about money, and then it just kind of shifted. I think, for me, like looking at things like head on, being fearless with the looking at it. And I did a lot of journaling and so on, and it dissolved. So, but I did have that, like I don't want to, what I do want to do is I want to move forward from a place of inspiration I'm just service oriented. It was like, was born this way. So how can I serve doing what I love and making a living, right? So so at this moment in time, because of our situation in the world, it's kind of like I'm paying close attention to finances and being really careful and looking at new ways of looking at money. for myself, or what I do have and what I'm using it on, and like kind of reevaluating all that.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I mean, what I'm choosing to do with my writing and my work is not to make money. It's like I just don't feel good if I'm living that way. It has to come from that compelling, that like inspiration or that intuition or that compelling feeling to do something.
Yeah. I think that that's an overlying theme for all of these. And, coincidentally or not, I am finding that everybody that's in this series, and also just people that I work with and connect with in general, we're all doing things that we're passionate about, and it was never money driven, or we would be doing previous careers. We would have never changed what we were doing before that made more money or was easier money or whatever it is. So the ultimate great dream is to do what you love and then be able to survive and thrive with it, of course. But where it's not just a strictly money-based decision, and you can't create in the way in which you do from that place. I mean, it wouldn't feel as authentic as it does. So you can tell that it's coming from a genuine place of connection, and whether it's channeled or intuitive or divinely guided, all of that.
Yeah.
If you were to sum up all the work you do, or have it embodied into 3 words, what would it be?
Over time, let's see.
Or just not necessarily over time, actively what you're working on now.
I would say probably I might have 4. Like that there's hope. There's always hope, and holding on to that. There's always, even if you're in a dark period, there's hope. And connected with that would probably be the healing. And I'm going to add another word in.
You can toss out as many as you like. It's all good.
I would say something about like the fearlessness, looking at life and whatever pops up for you and whatever comes up in our lives fearlessly, and that is the portal for joy. So even if I remember someone said this, a spiritual teacher, I was reading something, it was like, before I was aware, I was depressed. After I was aware, I was depressed. It's like, but you have that like detachment. You're kind of watching yourself go through a challenging time, which is really different from identifying and really spiraling down. It's like, oh, there's that discomfort. And so there's the hope, and then there's healing. I think that there's the healing when we do really look at something deeply within ourselves, and then it kind of is you're creating the ground to live joyfully.
Sure.
Even when you don't feel good.
Yeah. Well, the foundation matters, right? And we have to do the behind the scenes work sometimes, even though it's not as pretty or as easy.
And of course, and that's when we grow.
Yeah.
Is when it's a bit of a challenge. And that is what my baby Thomas, that is kind of what I'm getting at, was like, that was one of the most challenging things, to live in an isolated environment, watching my infant struggle to breathe day in and day out. Like, it was the most painful. It was incredibly painful. At the same time, it was the opening. Like, I had many mystical experiences during that time, and many openings into really what he taught me is love. So I think that this whole conversation for me is about how do we live in love, with love, sharing love in the deepest way that we can. And that's what my little infant, he was like, so that, as challenging, as painful all that was, it was like, that was the portal for me of opening to this deeper sense of love.
And is that the same sort of experience that you had following that too, with the work with Adam? Was it kind of did it feel familiar in that way?
It felt familiar in that I was watching my child suffer.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, it was almost like he was self-inflicting it, whereas Thomas was born that way. He was born with a physical thing. And Adam, and I would struggle with that, because I would ask myself, while Adam was alive on this planet, I would kind of ask that question. So it was different. And that's where like it was different, because it was more ongoing and we were communicating. So it was like 2 people. And so I guess the beauty in that was, because, an infant, a newborn was not verbal. But with Adam, we did have that that whole shift. And one of the important things in my book, and that I believe in, that Adam taught me through his addiction, is communication. Like, how am I communicating with myself, and how am I communicating with him?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and he was also in recovery. So our communication, we had already had a really deep connection anyway. And it's kind of like the addiction behaviors. I was like trying to fix him, and why are you doing this? And of course, guilt ridden. But then once that started to ease up for me, it was like my communication with him was different. And so I think that was the difference in the two relationships. Is it was almost like, but actually, now that you're asking that, almost like when I was living with, when Thomas was alive, it was almost like, because I was so isolated physically from everybody, it was more like a communication with spirit. Whereas Adam, it was like communication with spirit and a lot of people, a lot of like physical and emotional support from people and groups. So that would probably be the difference in that. But it still was, he definitely stretched me. So whenever we're being stretched and our hearts are being stretched, it's always, they were just being stretched in different ways.
Well, and that's when there's more room for love, right? Like, that's how it works.
That's right.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really amazing to see the way that you've transformed yourself. I mean, transforming, like your book, but into so many beautiful gifts for others in a way that helps to heal you both, I feel like.
Right. I know, I never could have dreamed it up. It was just, you know, you just can't, I just could not have dreamed, this is not how I imagined my life to be. So.
Well, and it seems like it's just beginning for what is in store for you with this work.
Yeah. Each day is kind of like that, right?
Yeah. Is there anything that you need to shift to get out of your own way when it comes to, whether it's creating or launching or growing the work that you do?
I would say the most insidious thing that sneaks up on me is self-judgment. It's so sneaky. It's like in there, and it's just in there, and I'm judging, like, you didn't do enough today. You're really lazy. Like, how come you didn't do more? You should be on social. It's like I've had that voice that's, you should be other than how you are. And it just sneaks in, and sometimes I don't catch it right away. So I would say that that's one of my most challenging aspects, because it just, again, it sneaks in, and it's, of course, now I can catch it and say, oh, that's what that was. But sometimes it does take a while to get to that point of putting my finger on it.
Yeah, the self-talk and the shoulds, right?
Yeah,
and that's where I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I shouldn't be doing this.
Do naps today?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a vicious circle, I think, for everybody, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, but it becomes an extra layer of pressure when we are our own boss, I find.
Yeah.
And with all the freedom that comes with that, there's also a lot of self-judgment and pressure and inner struggle with that never-ending to-do list.
Right. And then prioritizing, and
Mm-hmm.
and then changing it. It's like, oh, that was my that doesn't really feel right now. That doesn't feel best right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and being able to discern that and making those choices and changes. This is an interesting time to kind of try on some of those shifts, because we are limited to what we can do, in the outward facing part of the world in some ways.
Right.
So.
Right. And that's where the inner part is. That's where the inner part is so important, and being able to kind of like make space for that inner quiet, so that we can listen and hear more deeply what our guidance is.
Yeah. And what advice do you have for other people who are seeking to follow their path of passion or purpose? Or you could also, tie in advice or words of wisdom for people experiencing grief.
I guess I come back to that, like, how are we going to face it? Like, having like a few different as an educator, one of my areas of expertise is working with different learning styles. So we all at different times need different things, different tools. So like, So I would say like building up that, if you don't already have it, like I had to put a list on my fridge when I became self, living, I'm trying not to use negative words, when I've chosen to live inside most of the time for my health and everyone else's health. So I had a list on my fridge of like what I could do because I forgot. I was like, well, what can I do? So I had to put a list of, so like for me, like journaling. So I was already doing this before, but journaling several pages each morning just to like process whatever that is. So having something for the mind, having something for the body, like breathing, like coming into, I've been doing a lot of whole body breathing, which has really helped to just oxygenate and clear. So it's like having something for the body, having something for the mind, the journal, especially like writing it out, and also staying really physically moving our bodies, moving, walking, doing jumping jacks. I have a friend who has a trampoline in her house, like whatever it is, like, and noticing those parts of ourselves and what we need at different times. Cause it's not just one, having a few and look and noticing when is it in my body? When is it in my mind? When does it have to do with spirit? And I think it's that noticing and that awareness of what is going on, and then choosing something that will help you feel better. And so having like a few, even making a list, what can I do for my body? How can I calm my mind? How can I nurture my spirit?
Yeah, I like that as a tie-in also with the ways that you're talking about the expectations that we put on ourselves, because regardless of your profession or whether you're self-employed, this is all really good information during times like this, and always just to know that maybe today I need to do yoga, maybe tomorrow yoga isn't what feels good. Maybe I need to go for a walk, and maybe I need to take a nap today, and maybe I don't need to take a nap tomorrow. I need to stay up later to do this, or I need to go to sleep earlier to do something different. And it doesn't always have to look the same, which gets to be a delicate balance when we're talking about, all the lists of the things that we should do and the things that we should do to maintain our body, mind, and spirit health, and our business health and our sanity. And then also trusting the intuitive guidance to know that looks differently every day, and that's okay too.
Right, right, right. And to me, this is, our current situation. I like calling it the corona, because corona means crown, our crown chakra.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like calling it the corona's here. It's like an invitation to put our crowns on and kind of like receive and open. And so,
Yeah.
and that's again my connection with Thomas. So it's like it's just another challenge that we have. It just looks, it's more, this is obviously more global. But it's an invitation to all of us to open put our crowns on, put our coronas on, and open up.
Yeah. This is something we should already be doing. So now this is an extra nudge.
It's like, all right, come on, people now.
Yeah. As loud as possible. Yeah. Yeah. Any other, well, I mean, one last question, I guess, would be, what, out of all the different modalities you do and the different ways in which you work with art and grief and healing and teaching, what's the number one thing that brings you the most joy?
Writing. Either journaling for myself and writing, or like in my personal, or writing, just writing. Like I'm really enjoying this process of looking at baby Thomas's life, and right now it's kind of mind-blowing, actually.
I think it's such a awesome way to honor both of them too. So I can't wait to see what you create with that.
Me too. I think it's starting to wrap up.
Yeah. Well, good.
Of course, I say that it'll probably be like another, and there's another show. Yesterday I was like, I can't believe you're still working on this. You should have been done. You should have been done this. Like, what's taking so long? Like, just go with your own pace. Just take your own time.
The only you should be worrying about is that you should take as long as you need. That's right. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up, for whether it's advice or bits about you or anything else to share with the community?
I guess it's really beautiful to breathe together and just all coming into our breath and breathing. There's something about, and I think with Thomas's problem, I mean, it really was living breath to breath, and with the virus being a respiratory thing, and all spiritual teachings talk about breath and how important the breath is in spirit. And so I think that breathing together, and breathing wholly with a W and an H, holy and holy, is
Mhm.
is just the most beautiful thing gift we can give to ourselves and others.
Definitely, I agree. I'm a huge breathwork fan, so I'm the same page with you on that. Thanks so much for sharing everything, Lisa. And I will put links to all your work and the files that we share. And we look
Aww.
forward to seeing what you're going to teach soon. Hopefully, we'll post some things with Wild Ginger in the weeks ahead.
Thank you. This has really been fun.
Thank
What
you.
an interesting way of communicating, Nicole.
Yeah, right? Well, this is a project that I had been in the works long before this happened, but now there was just no reason to waste time. So here we are. And it's great because it gives me a chance to see all my beloved community members from near and far, regardless of whether the doors are open. So
And thank you so much for all that you do to support individuals in our community in a healthy way, body, mind, spirit.
thank you.
It's really, I'm really inspired by what you offer our community.
Thank you. It's a true gift for me. So thanks so much, Lisa. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Nicole. Bye.